unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
Art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the AIPAD. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the AIPAD, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the AIPAD. My guest today is Lydia Melamed Johnson. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did, which is quite impressive on your first try.
Thank you. So Lydia is the executive director of the Association of International Photography Art Dealers, AIPAD, and the Photography Show. She joined the organization in 2021 as fair director and grew into the executive director leadership in 2023. In these roles, Lydia leads the organization's strategy and operations, overseeing AIPAD's flagship event and driving its programming. Her aims have been to facilitate AIPAD's return to the Park Avenue Armory, grow attendance back to pre-pandemic levels, and reestablish the event's prominence, revitalizing its global influence and expanding membership, further solidifying its position as a leader in the fine art photography community. Before her time at AIPAD, Lydia served as the Partnerships and VIP Relations Officer for Paris Photo and Paris Photo New York, presented with AIPAD, where she was the U.S. representative on the Paris Photo team, launching the postponed fair in the Americas. In this role, she worked across departments to develop the domestic audience for the European fair. Lydia's career also includes over 10 years as director at Robert Simon Fine Art. There, she led exhibitions and business development with a broad art fair and exhibition calendar, launching the gallery's first contemporary art exhibitions and stewarding the gallery's relocation to the prestigious Fine Art Building off Madison Avenue. In addition to her professional work, Lydia is deeply involved with her alma mater, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she serves on the board of visitors for the Art History Department, which this year celebrates its centennial and position as the first standalone art history department in the United States. Lydia is also the CFO of Vista's Virtual Images of Sculpture in Time and Space, a nonprofit initiative founded by the late gallerist and collector Hester Diamond to present sculpture installation art in a dynamic digital format. Lydia holds a BA in art history and European history from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So before we start, are you a Midwestern girl?
So I'm not. I am by blood, not by birth. My entire family is from Wisconsin. My parents met at the University of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. My grandparents went to the University of Wisconsin. I am the third generation art historian from the University of Wisconsin. But when my parents met in the 70s, my mother turned to my father and said, "Get me out of Wisconsin. Pick a coast." She had gone to the Institute of Fine Arts in New York for her master's, and I think had loved New York and assumed that it would be New York. And my father was a little bit more laid back and said, "Great, California." And they moved to the Bay Area, and that's where I grew up. But when I was looking at colleges, I went to, this is going really far back. I went to a very small high school because I was an athlete during high school. And so everybody at my school knew everything about you. And when I was looking at colleges, I really wanted to go somewhere that would be a college experience and where my professors wouldn't know that my dog had gone to the vet 2 days before or, had, who's my parent, my brother's best friend wasn't the son of my math teacher, these kinds of things. So I was looking at bigger schools, and I was also looking specifically in different places where I didn't think I would end up. I really wanted a kind of concrete and set place that I would be for 4 years. It ended up being 3 because I spent a year abroad, but and I had a long history with Wisconsin, and my grandmother still lived in Milwaukee, and I had a grandfather on my father's side lived in Lake Geneva. So
nice.
It was, so I actually got to spend some really great time with my grandmother, who I was very close to. During that time, I got to see her pretty much every other week. She'd come down to Madison. And so that was a huge pull for me as well. And the art history department there is kind of one of these small but mighty forces that you wouldn't know how many great art historians have come out of it until you start looking. And it's something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, that's also, I mean, I didn't know that, but we'll get into your education a little bit further down the line because I really want to talk about it.
Have you spent time in the Midwest?
No, but I know a lot of people from the Midwest, and they're always like the sweetest people. So I always ask. And then I saw you went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm like, I wonder if she's a Miss West girl. But let's jump into your current role, which is you're the executive director of the photography show AIPAD since 2023. Yeah. And you also served as the director of the photography show since 2021. So let's begin with talking a little bit about the photography show because it's one of my favorite fairs. So please go ahead.
I love hearing that. It's an interesting thing because either people know about AIPAD and love it and are obsessed with it and it's their favorite fair or their favorite dealer, or it's something that's just not on their radar. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting and speaks to kind of some of the parts of the photo industry and people that or the photography market industry, and how people collect across different mediums. So it's always fascinating to me when I hear somebody's like, it's my favorite fair. I'm like, me too, but for different reasons. Yeah. So the photography show is the longest running globally art fair dedicated to the medium of fine art photography. Continuous. It has been, we're in our 44th year. And there was the only break in that contiguous line is the pandemic, of course. And I don't believe there was an online fair, but I know that they did different activations during that time. And it is at the Park Avenue Armory and brings together a global collection of art dealers, gallerists, private dealers, publishers, and really is an encyclopedic experience of the photography canon. So you have everything from the earliest possible process, right? You will have these unique tiny objects from like the first days of photography to things that are working with AI that were printed days ago or are still being kind of manipulated, and you're watching artists work in really experimental ways. And I think that's really incredible that you can walk into this one room, similar that you can walk into many institutions like the Met or the National Gallery, and there are these encyclopedic museums. This is really an encyclopedic fair of photography, and that's the best way that I can describe it for anyone who's curious and wants to visit. You'll be able to kind of see the beginning, the middle, and the now. It's certainly not the end because photography as a technological medium is constantly evolving.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine how it's going to progress in the future with all the advancement in tech now.
Yeah, exactly. And photography, more than any other medium in art, is ready for it, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's always been an experimental medium and it's always been something that has all on the cusp of technology and looking to the next thing, and evolving. And pushing the evolution of technology, I think, because some of these different reactions and chemical reactions have pushed experimentation in other fields that happened in a dark room. So yeah, 100%. It's reactive and proactive.
Yeah. So what drew you to working at AIPAD?
So it goes back to the resume that you just read, which was funny because I haven't thought about some of these things in a little while. And I smiled when you said Perry Photo. So I worked with a lot of AIPAD members during the Perry Photo New York time, because when they came to New York, they were working really closely with AIPAD to present that fair. And so I got to meet a lot of board members through that process, and they were great and, really passionate about photography and really passionate about growing this New York event. And I thought that was really interesting because Perry Photo was, we're talking about evolution, but was evolving out of the photography show and of course Perry Photo. But Perry Photo New York was something that was replacing the photography show at that time. And so to have this group of individuals who are, handing off the baton still be so incredibly passionate and excited about what that meant for photo, endeared the whole organization to me really, really quickly. And so when they came to me, 2 years later, when they were relaunching the photography show post-pandemic in a much smaller scale, it was an easy yes, because I knew that I would have the support and the enthusiasm and that passion behind this project. And they were ready to try and do all the things that we had been really excited to work on together in 2019.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about your role as the executive director and what excites you most about leading the photography show?
We don't have enough time.
Okay.
I think this is actually really, it's an interesting thing to talk to you about, because I think this is really true about so many roles in the art world, in that it is, I'm going to say this word wrong. Is it indefinable, right? Or indefinable, in that every day is different. It is so broad and so narrow at the same time. So my role is to be the administrator, both operationally and strategically, for this members organization. I work insanely closely with our 13 board members who ideate with me. They are the fiercest advocates for their fellow dealers who make up our membership. And we are constantly trying to find new ways to best platform these galleries and the artists they're showing, dead or alive. And so my role is often to take all of these things that we think about and strategize on, and to figure out how to execute them with a small staff. We're a nonprofit. We are not a huge art fair company that, has many different departments and all of those things. So how can we best represent, 95 galleries globally, with so many different needs and priorities between those things, right? A private dealer has a different priority than our biggest blue chip gallery members. And so my role is really to bring all those things together and figure out how we can do that. And that's what I mean when I say we don't have enough time, is that every single problem is a different day or challenge. They're not really problems. Of course, there are some problems, but the challenges of trying to best represent art dealers in what is constantly a changing world, especially right now with really volatile markets and different political issues in different countries for, the international aspect of our name, it can be multifaceted. And so that's how I would best define my role. But, the day-to-day part of it is making sure our newsletters are going out. Right now you're getting me, we're weeks away from the photography show. So today I spent a lot of time working on our advertising plan with our fabulous PR team, working with my team to make sure all of our sponsors and partners are organized in such a way that we're going to deliver on all of our agreements. And we're working on the actual installation or the plan for the installation of the floor, signage. We were working on the banners that will be outside the armory. And so, that was today.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I have a meeting with a director of another organization where we're going to talk about collaborating for 2026. So it varies. It varies a lot. And I think another part of my role is doing exactly this, right? This was a part of my day, and talking about AIPAD and being a voice for the organization when our members, who are our stakeholders, who are the ones that we represent, can't advocate for everyone at the same time, or can't always communicate that. So that's the other part of my job is to communicate AIPAD's mission and what we're trying to do with the photography show and the year-round programming that we do.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite aspect of your job?
Oh, that's a great question. I really love my job. My favorite part of, okay, so you mentioned that I worked at a gallery for 10 years. I love a project. I love a project with an end date. So the fair is a huge part of my job. It's also my favorite part of the job, because we get to plan for pretty much 10 months of the year to put on this incredible event. And it's bigger than a wedding. It's doing so much for so many people. It's a convening, it's a gathering. Curators use it as a conference and all of these things. And we get to, and we being my team, get to create the atmosphere and put all these things together to present to the world what photography in New York is, what photography presented in New York can be, because we are the representative domestically, right? Perry Photo is incredible. There's Photo London. There's all these different things. But in April, if you love photography, you're in New York and you're with us. So being able to hold that element of the calendar and to put the fair together is definitely my favorite part. If we're going to go even smaller than that, I, as many art people, I'm an intensely visual person. So I love designing the fair, working with our architects and making it look incredible. And getting to do that at the Park Avenue Armory is a dream.
Great location.
The first art fair I ever worked as an exhibitor was at the Armory. And never in a million years would I have believed that I would get to run a fair or an event in that space. So that's a dream come true every day.
Yeah. So now that we're talking about the Park Avenue Armory, this is your second year back. And after your return last year, what did this move signify for the fair and how did it reflect your vision for its future? And what is different this year?
Yeah. So it was a major moment for AIPAD. Pre-pandemic, they had been at the Park Avenue Armory for many years. Then they went to the Piers. And I think, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn in any way, that the Piers kind of was too big for the intimacy that this community has created. And it seems like the Park Avenue Armory is just the correct size and scale for this. And so after the pandemic, when they decided they wanted to do a fair again, I think they took that and they made these decisions before they hired me. So I can't take credit for what I think was an incredibly intelligent decision on behalf of the board and the president at the time, to scale it way back, to find a new venue, to start afresh, to bring in new staff, and to present a smaller scale exhibition of photography and see what the temperature was. Is there still demand in New York for this fair? Is there still demand for any fair in New York? What is that? And so they found a new venue, and that was Center 415, which was a really cool, quirky, fresh venue that nobody had ever used before. And the first year, people were still in masks. It was really interesting, but everyone was so happy to see each other. And so I think that gave the board the confidence to do another year there. And that second year, we got to partner with ICP and put Catherine Opie on the revolving doors and do all these really cool things that kind of made it a little bit more of an interactive and not interactive, but interactive, but immersive. You walked in and you were surrounded by photography. Like you literally couldn't walk through the doors. The only thing you could see was Thelma Golden's face or Miranda July. And I think that was the moment that we all kind of recognized that AIPAD was back, that there was demand, that the galleries wanted this to happen. And it was about during that time, we had been working towards getting the Park Avenue Armory for years, but it was around that time that we knew we could do it because it's a huge step. That venue is incredible, but it's an institution and you have to work with certain rules around it, which are understandable. That renovation's incredible, but it's a challenge and it's something that you need to be ready to take on and you need to be ready for that investment. So when we were able to get the lease there and do that for 2024, that was a big moment of AIPAD reclaiming that space, I think, in recognizing what this community can bring together there. So last year was amazing. We broke all AIPAD attendance records pre-pandemic. So that was, for me, like a really nice, satisfying kind of achievement unlocked, that the gamble was correct, that you build it and the people will come. But as with any kind of new venue, new staff, all these different things, some of the things like just didn't work as cleanly as we wanted them to. So for this year, the kind of two more logistic changes, or I guess there's three logistic changes, is one, the entry to the fair will not be straight up the once you of course enter through the grand staircase up into the double doors, but then you're going to turn right through one of the historic rooms to get your tickets and check in, so that we don't have two check-in places that you have to go through like you did last year. And then once you're in, and you can go kind of anywhere. The second one is that we've pulled the publishers, our photo book publishers and partners from the Board of Officers room, which is one of the gorgeous historic rooms, and we've brought them into the drill hall. So they're alongside our gallery. So it's much more integrated. And I think that will change the feel of the floor plan a lot, just in terms of making it a little more dynamic. And I think the energy is going to be really good from that. And it was hard because I think anybody who's gone to TAFAF or, any of the fairs there, it's a bit of a warren to get through all and to know exactly which room is which. And so just being able to consolidate that there. We still have the AIPAD Talks room. We've moved into the incredible Tiffany room, which I could just stand in all day, and will probably be whenever I need my Zen place in between AIPAD Talks. You might find me hidden amongst some stained glass. But all of the exhibitors, all of the publishers, everyone will be in the drill hall. So that's that. And then the third is that we're opening for our VIPs the night before. And that was really in response to our European and Asian dealers saying, we're traveling so far to have the VIP day on Thursday and only 3 full days being open to the public. It was great, but it's hard to make that investment worthwhile, and we'd love it if we could do another day. So again, there's all different challenges with all these things that you have to problem solve for, but we're doing an evening opening for our VIPs and VIP ticket purchasers on Wednesday night, and then we'll be open to the public Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which also means that we have 3 more talks, and our program was able to grow, because we don't like to offer talks during the VIP day because we find that elitist. We can talk about what VIP days already are elitist and all those things, but we really want our programming to be accessible. And so that's something that I'm really excited about. And that's another part that's really fun about my job, is getting to put together those panels with our chair of our education department, and internally my team, Irene and NJ are really instrumental in that, in putting together programming that speaks to, again, the encyclopedic nature of our membership. So, it's great to have the fantastic contemporary artist who everyone wants a selfie with, but also recognizing kind of where the inspiration for that artist is coming from, right? What is he looking at, or what is she looking at? And having education that goes across all of those things. And education is such a huge part of AIPAD's mission, and in making sure that the knowledge is accessible to all.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So now we've talked a little bit. I went
on a bit of a tangent.
No, it's great, because you've touched on a lot of things that I actually wanted to cover through the questions. Great. So that's perfect. But with the 66 international member exhibitors and several newcomer galleries, how do you curate the fair to ensure it represents the best of contemporary photography?
Okay, so that's a great question. And I think it has a lot to do with when we bring in these guest exhibitors. So our members, they're all vetted, and that's to become a member of AIPAD is I want to say intense, but intense is the wrong word, but it's tough. You need to get reference letters. You need to understand kind of what the organization is. You need to have some knowledge of what we do and kind of how it all works. And we've made that a little bit easier with our associate membership program, to try and bring in younger emerging galleries and give them the opportunity to learn a little bit more about AIPAD from the inside. But when we bring in these guest exhibitors, it's really fun and cool to see what they're bringing, because often the reason that they haven't shown with us before is because they're showing something that we haven't shown before. And so, I think about we had an NFT at Center 415 when that was all kind of breaking, and it was the first NFT ever shown at AIPAD, and it was beautifully presented. The context was all there, and it was a photograph by a great photographer. And I think that's what's really cool about it. And that's what gives us the ability to say that we do show the most cutting edge photography.
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't call them guest exhibitors, because like 4 of them have just become members this year after applying for the fair. They also applied for membership. So I don't even think they'll be called guest exhibitors because they're coming in. But then also our members are showing some of the preeminent contemporary or our more established members are showing some of the premier photographers in the world. So we get it on both sides. We get the kind of things that you might not have heard of, but also the people that are on the cover of Aperture and
Yeah. So you've also mentioned that that you are now mixing the photo book with the exhibitors. Can you in the drill hall? How does this elevate the photo book status as an art object? And what conversations does AIPAD hope to spark about the relationship between printed matter and traditional photographs by doing this sort of mix?
That's a great question. I think that was something last year that we didn't recognize how separate they can feel until we had them in one room and the galleries in another. And so what was so interesting last year, and this is more, I think, speaks to the learning aspect of my job, which is you have to be okay with admitting you were wrong, and you have to recognize that you don't know everything. And I know that I know nothing. But that was incorrect, because we would have book signings with their publishers and their galleries, and you would see the artist running from one to the other. And again, the Park Avenue Armory, the most beautiful building, all these things, but a bit of a Warren. So especially with the checkout conundrum I said we had, it was not good. And it just very clearly spelled out that photo book is it's already immersed in this. It's already wrapped up in it. And I don't think we need to elevate it. I think that the respect for photo book and publishers is really deeply felt in the photography community, but I'm excited to present it alongside the artist's work at the larger scale, so that you can truly feel the intimacy of the book that you can take home and interact with more, as well as the thing that you might hang on your wall. And so much, I think, that doesn't get spoken enough about. I'm phrasing this wrong. That I don't think is discussed enough. Is the kind of accessibility price points of photography, and how you can really find incredible things for relatively affordable prices. But, for the starting collector, sometimes a photo book is what you can afford. And I don't want there to be any difference in your purchasing experience at AIPAD than when you buy a photo book and when you buy a 5-figure photograph. I think that it's really beautiful to see someone start their collecting journey that way. And I think this will engender that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you actually mentioned the entry price point for photography, because you're completely right. Obviously, like, I'm a young quote unquote collector, so my entry into the collecting world was prints and photographs.
Yep.
That's why I mentioned that the photography show is one of my favorite fairs, because you can really get like really beautiful things instead of a painting that's like $200,000 or $40,000. So I really like the accessibility that photography lends.
It's interesting. And, I think that any art fair can be really intimidating to somebody who isn't familiar with all the politics and all of these things. And something that we're trying so hard to do, and what this goes back to the programming and making sure that we're not offering it only on VIP day, that somebody who comes in on a student ticket has just as much ability to go to this talk as somebody who is a major curator at a museum. Is we've talked a lot, and our board is really good about this, of, kind of telling dealers that you never know who you're talking to, and you never know who's ready to buy in a year. And I think that this is something that I love about photo, and that is that you might walk onto a booth at AIPAD and see something absolutely gorgeous, and you're like, I love that. I want to take it home. What's the price? And it may be $40,000.
Yeah.
But I strongly encourage you to talk to that dealer anyway and say, oh, that's just not doable for me today. Would love to know if you have anything else by that artist that might be in this price point. And if not, can I join your mailing list? And I'd love to come to some of your other shows. Write your email down in their book. Go to the booth next door and see what those price points are, because you just don't know. And one really good thing about New York art fairs is that it is legally mandated that everyone has to have a price list.
Yep.
It has to be somewhere. They might make it a little hard. It might be on a sheet in a binder, but somewhere in the booth. And we are really encouraging our dealers to put them on the labels. But if they're not on the labels, somewhere in the booth is a price list. And if you don't feel comfortable asking that question, you can go find the price list. And if it's out of your budget, fine. You can move on. You can still talk to the dealer. You can do all these things. But I guarantee that if you have some amount of money that you're coming to the photography show to try, and you want to bring something home, you want to buy something for someone, you can afford something at this fair. And that's really cool, because that's not something you can say about every fair. And yeah. And if you have 6 figures to spend, we also have something for you.
Yeah. Something for everybody.
Something for everyone.
But talking a little bit more about your exhibitors, the 2025 show emphasizes a dialogue between canonical photographers and new curatorial approaches. This year's exhibitors range from blue chip galleries like Howard Greenberg and Peter Fetterman to emerging spaces like Galleria Alta and On Gallery. Have you observed any interesting dynamics between the established and the newcomers?
Not yet, but I know a couple of them are placed very close to each other on the floor plan. So I can report back after the fair.
Yes, please. I'm interested to know.
I think that last year we had, so I think I mentioned earlier in our conversation, we started this program called the Associate Member Program. So to become a full or AIPAD member, you have to have been in business for, I think, 5 years. You have to have 2 reference letters from members. You have to have shown at certain exhibitions. You have, a pretty impressive resume.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do for younger galleries who might not have a physical space yet, who have sold primarily online, or there's different challenges right now, or might not be in a metropolitan center, right? They might be in somewhere farther off that traveling and doing these art fairs is not financially viable because they're expensive for galleries. And so to become an associate member, you need 1 member reference letter, 1 reference letter from a respected member of the photography community. So that can be a collector, that can be a curator, that can be an artist. And you only have to have been in business for 2 years. And what we get and the membership dues are lower. And what we get in exchange is that you have to join one of our committees. So you have to work for us for a little bit, which is pretty much a meeting every 3 months. And
Totally doable.
Totally doable and fun. I have to say, my board and our committees right now are fantastic. They're a really incredible group. And we're doing some really cool things on these committees. So that's kind of the exchange. And through those committees, they work with our more established members. They get to kind of meet more people and do all of these things. And so we started as a pilot program, our first program, and you can be an associate member for 2 years. So this whole thing, at the end of it, you will have been in business, if you, at the lowest end, right? You would have been in business for 4 years, which is still a year before you'd be able to apply for full. So there is also an accelerated part of this. And that's been really interesting. And those dynamics have been really fun to watch, because there's certainly respect, but there's also that word, that's completely overused, disruption, and new ways of thinking about social media and online platforms and these things that are great to see. And so those conversations have been really cool to see. And last year, I think were really fun to see at the fairs. The associate members were kind of clumped together, and this year they're not. They're dispersed differently, which had more to do with the layout and creating the space for the publishers on the drill hall, which is all those, I never recognized just how much goes into planning a floor plan at a fair, but certain things were changed. So they are much more dispersed within. So that means, I'm trying to think of who you met. Actually, so like Alta and Peter Fetterman are directly across an aisle from each other.
Oh, nice.
So just two that you mentioned. Because when you said that, I was like, I think they might be next to each other. So those two outside walls are going to face each other. And I can't wait to see what that conversation looks like. Never mind if Peter and Paolo, that's also funny, their names meet. Maybe they've already met. I actually don't know.
So talking a little bit more about the programming, because I really love the talks and programming that fairs usually plan around that week. So the expanded AIPAD talks program features thought leaders from across arts and culture. How does this year's programming, from panel discussions to walkthroughs, aim to contextualize the exhibited works within larger conversations about photography's evolving role in contemporary art?
Whew. Loaded question. I like it though. We're going to start with this really cool panel we're doing with Indigenous female artists, Cara Romero and Shelley Nero. And they are being shown by two different galleries at the fair. And so they're going to be in conversation with a moderator and talking about Indigenous people, about specifically photography within this realm, and the both documentation of Indigenous people, but also how they're changing narratives around them and how they're empowering their own sense of self and the thoughts around that, because they're two such powerful women, and their artwork really illustrates that. So that's one that I'm really excited about.
See, that's like a conversation I'll be signing off for immediately. I'm like, this sounds really awesome.
I know.
This is for me.
So that one's really cool. Another one is Keisha Scarville, Tommy Ka, and Diana Monkosian are going to be in conversation about being first generation American creatives and what having these kind of two cultures means, especially now. I think it's so important that art and photography specifically speaks to the moment we're in. Photography, photojournalism, documentation, as well as the more creative uses of photography to illustrate the time we're in, in the more esoteric sense, are so vital. And that's not even going into, that every time you open the New York Times or the Washington Post or any of these things, right, the first thing your eyes are drawn to is a photograph.
Yeah.
So I think making sure that we're talking about some of those things at the fair and some of the challenges that are going on in the global situation is something that I'm excited to present. God, there's 12 of them, so I have to think about,
that's a lot.
No, exactly. I mean, there's 3 a day, so I have to think through. We partner with the Muse Collection, who are just wonderful. They're doing a really fun panel with Kathy Ryan and Peter Barbieri on Larry Fink, this new archive that they just purchased. So that'll be kind of more fun visually. What else? Oh my gosh. I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, don't give everything away.
I know.
Let the people scour what talks they want to go to.
AIPAD.com/show.
Exactly. Go check it out.
Yeah.
But I also want to talk.
Subscribe.
Yeah. But I also want to talk a little bit about the discovery sector.
Yeah.
Which focuses on single artist and thematic presentations, including rediscoveries of iconic photographers. What criteria guided the selection of artists and galleries for this sector, and how does it aim to redefine what emerging means in photography?
Ooh, I love your questions. Okay. I need to stop I feel like I have to which I'm sure visually is an interesting thing. So the discovery sector is we'll call it a soft relaunch of something that AIPAD had done at the Piers before the pandemic. And in that context, it was specifically about emerging artists, somebody that really hadn't had a major show, that probably hadn't been at a fair of this caliber before, that might even be brand newly represented. So I think in that sense, this is different in that we are trying to start new conversations about artists and what they're working on and what it means now, alongside the Aperture Portfolio Prize, right? Who are 5 unrepresented artists, who hopefully at a fair that represents gallery dealers will change that. But, puts that conversation into play in what does it mean when you discover something anew, and whether that's a canonical photographer's second shot in the image that came right after the most famous one, or it's an artist who is brand new and who is using new technology, like Vincent is, and creating something that's so otherworldly. So what do you get walking from one stand to the next in that context? And especially with Sig and Vincent, the subject matter of some of their photographs are so similar in the floral aspect that I'm really excited to see what those 2 booths look like, built and showcased in that way.
Yeah, that actually sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
What do you hope attendees will take away from this year's edition of the photography show?
That you can afford photography.
Great. That's a great one. Yeah.
that you can live with it.
Yeah.
That you can stop looking at it on your phone only as something that is communicating or selling you something, and that it can serve this deeply meaningful purpose in the way that art should and does for so many people, and already does for most of the people that are walking into this fair. But that you shouldn't be intimidated by these dealers. They're wonderful people, and they are ready to talk to you, and they are ready to share their unending love for this medium and for their artists. And you will leave inspired, and you will leave wanting to know more about photography.
That is fantastic. How do you balance honoring the fair's 43-year legacy with innovating for the future?
So this is something that I give so much credit to the board for and for the membership. They are excited about the future, but they are so proud of their history. And what AIPAD did, it was founded in 1979. In the 80s, it went from hotel ballrooms and basements to the Park Avenue Armory to the Piers, to do all these different things. And it created a market for photography in New York. And it has created this moment that you can say the photography show is your favorite fair, but there are die-hard collectors who have been to every AIPAD. They have been to every single for the last 44 years, and it's also their favorite fair. And I think that's really cool. And that's what keeps me honest about it, and what keeps the mission, it's not even the mission, but the ethos of AIPAD so present in everything, where we can relaunch the discovery sector and I can push it a little bit further. And they're excited about that, but it's also honoring something that they created with, such strong intention in the past. And I think that it's also the respect that dealers and artists and curators, the institutional relationships that AIPAD has created and fosters and tends to, is so deeply felt that it's a great standard to be held to. And so everything has to be intentional and everything has to be of the highest possible quality. And to have those types of expectations put on you is really great because it allows you to stretch and it allows us to continue to evolve. But yet we haven't had that kind of crazy idea that just like nobody understood. Although maybe putting publishers in the board of officers was that one, but that's on me.
Well, speaking of crazy ideas, what are your long-term goals for the photography show and AIPAD? Tell me.
So we're going to have a talk show. No. Long-term goals for AIPAD, I think. So something that we had planned on starting to do in 2024, before we got the Park Avenue Armory, was to start doing off-season, as in not around the fair, programming globally, especially in concentrations of where especially in locations where we have big concentrations of galleries. Obviously, we have a ton of New York galleries that are members: Yancey, Howard, Bruce, Edwin, Brian Clamp. You can just keep going on. And I'm sure I've offended people by not having them in the first 5, but that come to mind. But I think we have 20 galleries in New York. We have 13 in Paris. We have 5 in London. We have a ton in San Francisco, in LA, at Bergamo Station, and further abroad. We have a ton in Tokyo. So there are these really strong concentrations, and I really want to bring the AIPAD audiences to those places. And so that is something that we had hoped to do in 2024. Taking on the Armory was such a big move and such a big change for, again, it's a staff of 3, that has been put on hold. And
wait, you have a staff of 3 people?
It's me and then 2 others, yeah.
And you're doing all of this?
So we have incredible contractors.
Okay, I was about to say, I'm like, you guys are like a super team. Jeez.
We are, I mean, my team is incredible. I am insanely proud to lead this team. But year round, we're only 3. We have Jean Dykstra in terms of contractors who edits our newsletter. We have the Alma team who obviously works with us on PR and communications. Joel Morrison, who runs our operations for the fair. Alexandra Dennis, who's our social media maven. Our accountant, who's amazing. We have that, but they're contractors and they work with us on kind of more set projects. Whereas myself, Irene, and NJ are in the thick of it every day. So with that in mind, taking on the Park Avenue Armory meant that all other kind of initiatives were going to be put on hold. And so the way we're making the first steps towards that activation globally is that starting this year, we have our AIPAD Exposure, which is our kind of well-known newsletter. We've also launched a second one, but which is always hits your inbox in the middle of the month. Now has a regional focus every month. So in March, it was the Netherlands and kind of the Low Countries in Europe, because the Rijksmuseum and Maddie and Hans there are opening the American Photography exhibition that is seminal. And so much of it was sourced from AIPAD members and even at the fair itself. And so we were really excited to put the kind of lens on Amsterdam and Antwerp and kind of all of those areas and our members there. And then in February, it was LA and Los Angeles to shine a light on what was happening around the fires. And some of our members who were doing fire relief fundraisers. So April will obviously be New York because we're having the small event you might have heard of. And then May will be London for Photo London and our galleries there. July will be, June is Santa Fe. We have a really nice concentration there and they're opening the biennial. So that's kind of our first step towards that. But that is really my next goal for AIPAD while we continue to evolve and iterate the photography show and make it the best fair it can be.
Yeah, no, those are incredible plans. And I look forward to actually seeing them all come to fruition.
Thank you.
But let's
You and me
backtrack.
both.
Yeah, but let's backtrack now a little bit because we talked a touch about your studies.
Yeah.
But you earned a BA in art history and European studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and studied art history and Italian at Syracuse University in Florence. What drew you to art history and how did your studies shape your career path?
So we kind of touched on that.
Yes.
So
Third generation
art is huge in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I was incredibly lucky to grow up around women and men who love art and who feel that art is vital to life, that it is something to be enjoyed, to be understood, to be marveled at, to not be understood, and that's okay, but to constantly have conversations around it. So it's something I always loved, and it's what drew me to art were the stories. It's funny. You think about now with like Gen Z terms, but like your personal lore.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my favorite stories about my childhood is that my mom, we would go to museums and we would play Name That Saint. And we're Jewish, but we're art historians.
Yeah.
So it's like, who's that? And it's like, oh, that's Saint Barbara with her tower, and like these kind of different things. So that was it was always just a part of it. And it was always fun. And it was never something to be feared. And it was always something to be interacted with and learned about in a really wonderful way. And I give a huge amount of that credit to my grandmother, Hope, who is the one that I mentioned I got to spend a lot of time with in Wisconsin. She lived in Milwaukee. And she was just a really incredible woman who just loved art and taught herself about it and never stopped learning and never stopped collecting and just had this appetite to interact with it. And so art history was not a no-brainer. I actually thought because as I said, I loved the stories. I actually thought I'd be a history major, and Wisconsin has an incredible history department. I think it's like ranked number 4 or something, especially in Russian history, which is interesting at this moment, but a tale for another time. But I took an art history class because I thought, I said, of course I'm going to take 202, which is the survey, Renaissance to modern or something. 2 classes and I was hooked. And that was it. And so what was the second part of that question? Sorry.
How did your studies shape your career path?
Oh, yeah. So pretty much I took that 202 class. I was like, all right, it's art history all the way. I took a class with a professor named Jane Hutchison, who actually had been at Wisconsin for quite a long time. She'd actually taught my mom when she was there in the 70s, during one of her first few years. And her class was all about iconography. And I loved it. I loved looking at a painting and being able to read it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not great at languages. And so being able to have a visual language is like, it's always made me wonder if I would be really able to read hieroglyphics. But to have a visual language with the memory that I have was really interesting. And I loved that. And I loved that it kind of opened doors the way a book does, to understanding what an artist might have been trying to say or what we were told he was trying to say, but what are some of the like little undercurrents to that. And so I decided to specialize in Italian mannerism, and which is kind of the weirdest of that because I love a weird painting. And that took me to Syracuse to study with Jonathan Nelson and Rab Hatfield at their study abroad program, and through them at ITATI in Settignano, where I got to work at Bernard Berenson's library. And that all set me on this path to work in old master paintings, which is where I went directly after school. I moved to New York, and I wanted to work at a gallery before I decided if I was going to get a master's or a PhD, because I wanted to make sure that I actually liked working in it. And I really like working. It's something that has maybe mystified people before, but I really enjoy it. And so I got this job with Robert, and yeah, it was just an incredible experience. And that took off, and it was through my time there that I fell in love with art fairs. And recognized that while I loved art, I wasn't particularly good at selling it. But I was really good at creating events where new audiences would come and interact with art and discover art. And that I was really good at creating those narratives of inviting new audiences in, and maybe demystifying a little bit of the process. And that led me to art fairs.
Well, I mean, you're in the perfect role now because that's exactly what you do.
Exactly. No, that's when you said, what do you like about your job? It's like,
yeah,
job.
There you go. But you also mentioned that you studied abroad.
Yeah.
In Florence, right?
Yeah.
How did that time influence your perspective on art and culture?
Oh, I mean, except for like, infectious disease and all of those things, how much I would have loved to live and, women's rights, but in a Renaissance court where, of course, if I had been born wealthy enough, there's so many different things so many different things have to go right to enjoy living in a Renaissance court. But, I think kind of similar to the Viennese secession movement, the Italian Renaissance and mannerisms, they were fully immersed lives. Like every aspect of your life, if you were rich enough, could be interacting with art. And I loved that. And I loved learning about these people, these intellectuals or these artists that did that. And I think that's something that, again, as an intensely visual person, really resonated with me. And so trying to recreate those things so that when you walk into a space, when you walk into the fair, you feel enclosed in art and engulfed by it.
So let's talk a little bit about your career post school.
Okay.
You began your career at Hausfeld Gallery in San Francisco, Sotheby's, and Biblioteca Berenson Villaitati, which is the Harvard University in Florence.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about these early experiences?
Yes. So those were my internships.
Okay.
And Hausfeld Gallery in San Francisco is run by Todd Hausfeld, who is one of the most amazing. This is going to be kind of a common refrain. I've had incredible bosses. I have never had a horrific boss, which is...
You're lucky. You're very lucky.
I know. I am well aware, and I try my darndest to make sure that nobody who's ever worked for me has had a bad boss, at least in me. But I've had really great mentors and really great bosses, of which Todd was the first. He's still a dear friend. Whenever he comes to New York, I see him. I can call him if I'm stuck on something. He's a dear friend of my mother's. Like he's incredible. And he and his team showed me the professionalism that needs to happen for a well-run gallery. And I, again, have not had the misfortune of having to work in a dysfunctional situation, but I have a lot of friends who have, and it is just so clear in the way that his collectors and his artists interact with him and work with him, that if you can do it professionally and correctly, like it pays dividends. And that taught me kind of how to comport yourself. And it was it was the first, my first step. And again, like, a story that I tell to people who ask me out for coffee for career advice. I misspelled the word opportunity in my email to him asking for an internship, which he corrected in the first line and then offered me the internship. And, he just said, we'll work on spell check, like laughed it off, got it out of there. I was mortified. It was horrific. I now spell check everything. It's a great way to learn a lesson. And when you have a good boss, that is how they will handle it. They will tell you made a mistake. They will tell you how to fix it and not do it again. And then they'll move on. Yeah. And so that was a really great place to start. And Sotheby's, I worked for Warren Whiteman in the chairman's office. And that was really cool because Warren was lovely to me. And but also because it gave me the first taste of how broad job descriptions can be, because he was in the chairman's office. He, had been a specialist before, but was working across this kind of broad range of clients, of events, of business getting, of all these different things. And I saw kind of how you can have a hand in so many different things and yet have an internal structure of how all of those things work, and having a strong staff under you to help you navigate that, of course. But it was a great way to see the inner workings of an auction house kind of from on high. Literally, the chairman's floor was a different floor. And not, I didn't get to understand exactly what Impressionist and Mod were doing and all of those things, but we would get to go to a Hill session because he had brought in something, or a client of his was working on something or wanted something. So that helped to understand. I got to see kind of the broader purview of what working in an auction house can be, and what all the opportunities are there.
Yeah. So then you went on to be the director at Robert Simon Fine Art for nearly a decade.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, and you worked with Old Master paintings there. How did this experience shape your understanding of the art market and your curatorial eye?
Ooh. When you interact with the most, the highest quality Old Master paintings every day, you get quite snobbish about quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that in that Old Masters are the only thing of quality. I mean that you learn the differences in condition. You learn the variations of technique, of draftsmanship, of conservation even. Sorry,
Yeah.
I keep hitting this. I'm very, as I said, I move
Talk
a lot.
with your hands.
Yeah. Probably my time in Italy. And I think that helped so much to shape how I view everything, not just art or what I might be curating. Because the details are so tiny and they're so exquisite that when you realize the kind of effort that was put into something that could be so small, and it could have been made for just personal devotion, yet the gold of a brocade sleeve is done with the just utmost precision. You realize that effort matters, and you realize that getting the details right and presenting something that is the best it can be matters, and that quality shows through. And I think that's kind of,
that's a skill you can universally carry on through
exactly.
everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was one of the most memorable projects you worked on while you were there?
So there were many, but of course, one being working with him, working around the project of the Leonardo was something that gave me insight to the highest of highs and just the kind of cacophony of noise that can be made around things and around, especially in the art world. And I think that experience was mind-blowing and life-changing in being able to interact with something so intimately. But that was one. I think the other was, I helped, we did the first presentation of Robert Simon Fine Art at TAFAF, and designing and helping to curate that room. There, we were in one of the historic rooms, was definitely a pinnacle. And that wasn't the first fair we'd done at the Park Avenue Armory. But, as I said, running an event there is a dream come true. I mean, that was it. That was a major milestone for me. And also a transformative one in my love of art fairs, because it was a very consolidated timetable to get that ready, and the kind of rush of doing that and of getting it all and of doing it and making these decisions and kind of working so closely with different factions of the art world and the fair team was fascinating. and really cool.
Yeah, for sure. In 2016, you co-founded October Art Week. Tell us a little bit more about Art Week.
Yes. So this is when we were talking about kind of what I love about art fairs and all of those things. October Art Week was something that I started with a dear friend, Bria Vizaka, and she was working at Otto Naumann, who's another old master dealer, and we were in the same building. We were in the Fine Arts building. We were 2 floors above them, and we recognized that when TAFAF came to town, and this was the first year that TAFAF New York was happening, and it was in October that year, that it would bring a whole new audience to New York for this very consolidated amount of time. And that, again, the Armory is very specific in how many galleries you can fit in there. And TAFAF does an incredible job of getting as many in as possible. But that's going to leave out so many galleries in New York that have the type of work that this clientele is looking for. And also because TAFAF has such an incredible brand and the quality is so high, the price points are high, and there's an intimidation factor. And so the idea of October Art Week started as an art walk, started as the night before TAFAF opens. All these galleries on the Upper East Side are going to be open to the public. They're going to serve lovely white wine and water, and you should walk in and look at some art and see some things. And it was a huge success that first year. And so then we kind of kept growing it so that it could become kind of this week-long thing. And and then Bria ended up moving on, and she lives in Italy now. And I worked with her successor, Liana Wolfman, who now currently is at Templon and is also a dear friend. And
so, I mean, your knack for event organizing started early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love an event. I love an event.
Well,
I'm available for parties.
Yeah. There you go. You know, that might be your next venture. Not in April. So after that, you also served as a corporate partnerships and VIP relations officer for Paris Photo New York from 2019 to 2020. How did your role there allow you to bridge corporate partnerships with the art world?
So this is a relationship that is, you know, a tale as old as time, right? When you think of the names that founded the institutions of the city, that one has always supported the other, and one has always elevated the other. And so marketing and partnerships is a really interesting dance of equalizing priorities for 2 organizations that want to present incredible art, but one has more of the means to do so. And so it's an interesting challenge that I've always really liked. And it's similar, you know, it's very similar, or not similar. It's integral in event planning and the type of planning that goes into a fair, that you have so many collaborators and you have to work with so many different people with so many different motivations and priorities. And I really enjoy that. And I really enjoy bringing institutions and organizations together in that way. And so it's tough. You know, it can be hard to make sure that the organizations that you want to work with, you know, when you're on the corporate side, are presenting something that aligns with your brand values, and vice versa. You know, a nonprofit might need funding, but you don't want to just take it from anywhere, as we've seen so much in the last couple of years. So that dance is really interesting. And I've been really lucky to work with some great corporations and companies that understand the ability of art to bridge conversations and to bring new eyes to offerings that might not have seemed accessible, or accessible is the wrong word, but might not have seemed relevant, and recognizing that, oh no, this is something that I'm interested in. So yeah, it's a delicate dance.
Yeah, for sure. As many corporate sponsors tend to have some murky kind of backstories. What were some of the challenges of launching Paris Photo in New York, especially during the pandemic?
I mean, so this is the great tragedy is that it never launched, and we were supposed to open April 1st, and obviously the world closed. I think it was March 11th. I was on a plane back from San Francisco when I got an email from my boss that we were postponing, because of course nobody knew at the time that it was going to be what it was. And so, yeah, I mean, that was tough and continues to be something of, for an individual like me who loves an event, who loves to put all of this energy into creating something. What we were going to present was really spectacular. And I remain very proud of that project for something that didn't end up coming to fruition.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's kind of sucky. You work so hard and then it never actually comes to life.
It was so close. We were going on
so
site.
Close.
We were like going on site to start building, I think 4 days or 5 days later. Like it was, we were the first international fair.
Yeah. So you're also an art collector.
Yes.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how your passion for art collecting began and how you decide on what to buy.
Absolutely. So it came quite naturally to me. I would even say biologically, in that I was raised in a household that it never occurred to me, or that art was out of reach, that you shouldn't have it if you want it, and it didn't matter, that you should always be surrounded by what speaks to you and what inspires you, and it didn't matter if it was an expensive print or those types of things. It just, that it was something that spoke to you. In college, I didn't have fine art on the walls. I had the Rokeby Venus and a Secessionist print. I didn't have fine art, but it's something that never occurred to me that I wouldn't at some point collect if I had the means to do so. Finer things, I suppose. But it's something that my husband and I have been able to do together, and we don't buy often, but we buy things that we really, really love. And it's been an interesting journey to navigate with him. He doesn't come from an arts background or more than kind of our relationship in that. And I think that's been kind of a bit of an introduction for him. And so what he likes and what I like can be very different, but we've found a common ground in the surreal, in the weird, in the slightly off, but still visually appealing. And that's everything from the first photograph we bought together, which was this Paul Cupido from a Basho that's a moon hovering on a horizon, that we both fell in love with, to this tiny Louis Fertino work on paper of an interior scene that he did during the pandemic, that just reminds us of that time and the beauty in the small things there, to the Tees event that we bought at the 2023 fair, that is this deep multi-level void. It's called The Void, and it sits at the far end of our apartment, and I like to stare into the abyss in the morning, and it's not scary, it's meditative, and so those things all kind of speak to us. And our most recent acquisition were these 3 tiny Jessie Mockern paintings that I'm absolutely in love with. So it's varied. And then we have a gift from my mother that I grew up with. It was outside of my bedroom, was a Richard Barnes photograph of the Unabomber cabin. So it's insanely beautiful and so strange. And I don't know how I'm going to explain it to my daughter when she inevitably asks what the photo of the cabin is of, but that's for another time. So yeah, it's been fun. It's fun to do. And it's nice to be in a position where my job is to bring incredible photography together and then go shopping.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can imagine. Get first pick and first dibs on everything.
Never mind Printemps. This is my new emporium.
Exactly. You've spoken also about the importance of pay equity for women, particularly in the art world. How do you advocate for gender equity in your role at AIPAD?
It's tough. I mean, it's something that is mind-boggling to me that it's there. But in terms of how I advocate for it, I mean, certainly we're a nonprofit, so, salaries are what they are, but it's certainly advocating for my team and also teaching them how to advocate, or teaching is a strong word, but encouraging them to advocate for themselves in these negotiations, both with me or with if it's a contractor who we really consider them a part of the team. I think it might have sounded a little bit more separate than it is. I mean, we all work really closely together, but if they're taking on other projects, I try to make myself available to them and go through any offers or something like that. But I think also AIPAD in general is showing similar market trends in the growing equity of women in leadership roles. So we recently had a collector and colleague in the industry asked me what percentage of AIPAD members are women. And that's a question on so many levels, but what I took it to mean, or the question that I could answer at least, was what percentage of AIPAD member galleries or dealers are women founded or women run?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, because you have to kind of keep distilling this, because as we all know, so many male names are on the door, but maybe the second highest person is a woman.
Yeah.
And we couldn't count that, but we could count maybe somebody who had been that first employee who then took over the business and currently now owns the operation. So we went through everything, and we also took any galleries that were maybe a husband and wife team that were founded together, even if it was the man's name. We 100% counted them as founders. And we found that 43% of our members are women. And that was massive.
Mm-hmm.
That was a real eye-opener for me. And I'm not proud of it because it's not something that I can say, we did, but I think that shows what's happening, and is a really interesting statistic on representation.
Yeah.
And especially in the photo world.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad, and I hope that percentage keeps rising, honestly.
Same.
What changes would you like to see in the art world to better support women and underrepresented groups?
I think, it's not enough, but a lot of the initiatives we've seen over the last couple of years is the right trajectory.
Yeah.
It is not enough. It's not moving fast enough. I think that's all very clear. And I think right now is its own question of kind of what the future of that is. But I think it is constantly trying to platform and celebrate the artists and the galleries and highlight the magnificence of these people, and of what they're doing and what they're accomplishing is, I think, the best thing we can do, because when it is unavoidable is when it has to change. And that's not a concrete answer, and I recognize that, but it's a massive challenge that I think so many people are working really hard to attempt to rectify, but it's gargantuan.
Yeah, it's a slow burn.
Yeah. And it's a slow burn of frustration and constant frustration.
Yeah. So then I always like to end my my episodes by asking my guests two of the same questions. The first one being, have you faced any challenges as a woman in the field?
Yes. I mean,
I'm waiting for the woman who says no.
and it's okay. So yes, I have.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said earlier, I've had incredible bosses and mentors. And in that, the challenges that I have faced as a woman have been helped by having support systems that backed me up. And I think the stories I would tell if we were going to spend an hour talking about this are so familiar to every woman in the art world. I think that it's been hardest to communicate what we're trying to do with AIPAD and the gender equity and all of these different things when you're a woman and when it isn't coming from the mouth of a man and when it doesn't seem distant enough from you where it can be taken as self-serving. And so I find that difficult. The more general misogyny and those types of things, like, of course, and who knows what jobs I didn't get that, those different things.
Yeah.
Those are the unspoken ones, right? The more spoken ones, I think, are when it's not taken seriously. And I think what has been great about the board that I have at AIPAD now is that is not present, and that it is taken with confidence.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, at least. And my second question is, what advice would you give to incoming women who want to work in the arts or want to be eventually an executive director at a fair?
So there's two things. One is women oriented and one is just being a young professional. For the women oriented, I would say, there are cliches that are horrible and true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dress for the job you want. Put your head down. Like these things. And I don't mean put your head down and let people treat you badly. I mean that there is nothing wrong with putting your head down, observing everything around you, seeing what those who have come before you have done, what has worked and what hasn't, and creating for yourself a path. And in no way, shape, or form does that mean you need to change your sense of self. You need to value yourself differently. It means take everything in before you act. And I think that that's something that is so important because you can save yourself from bad situations, or you can see if you've stumbled into one, as many do, you can start to understand how other people have reacted in the past. And so I think that that's something that is under talked about because it sounds like old-fashioned advice, but something that I think is helpful for young professionals in general. Your career is not going to turn out how you think it will. Again,
for sure.
If you had ever told me at my first fair at the Armory that I would be the executive director of a photo organization and running an art fair at the Park Avenue Armory, I would have said, "You are so kind. I can't believe you have that kind of confidence in me. No way." That is. I would have said, "I don't want that." I would have said, "I want to run an old master gallery. I want to do," right? You have no idea what opportunities will come to you. You have no idea how you will change. So, and maybe I have friends who knew exactly what they wanted to do and they did it and they love it and it is correct for them. But if you're having moments of uncertainty, that doesn't mean anything is wrong. It means you should listen to it. Again, it's kind of this observe thing, like take in all of the facts, take in all of the different feelings and instincts you have and listen to those and take a leap. I mean, going to Perry Photo was a huge leap for me. And, it almost turned out quite poorly, right? In that regard. And it could have, but it was something that felt right at the time. It was an opportunity that came serendipitously and I'm so glad I took it. So that's what I would say more professionally.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, my own trajectory, like half the things that I did, I would have never thought that I would do. I ended up in places I never thought I'd work and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So, just ride the wave.
Ride the wave. And that's like, ride the wave, look out for sharks.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yes. Look out for
do
sharks.
all the things and
for sure.
Remember all of your training and maybe riding this wave this way is the correct way to do it. But maybe it might take you off to a different island and that could be great. And it could not be, but also you'll be okay.
Yeah, you'll be okay in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have time for maybe 3 fire round questions.
Okay.
So I have 9 questions here. You can pick a number and then I'll read the corresponding question.
So I pick a number 3 times.
No, yes, a different number 3 times.
Just keep going.
Yeah,
until we get
just
the right
keep
one. Okay, let's start with 2.
Okay, what is the most underrated skill in gallery management?
A poker face.
Oh, okay.
Do I need to elaborate or?
No.
All right.
Next question. You can pick.
Oh, right. I was like waiting for you to just ask it. 8.
8. What's one thing in the art world that you think is overrated?
Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh, okay.
I got this question in last year with an interview, and it's like immediately what came to mind. And it's just not my wine, and it's served at every opening. I'm sure we will be serving it at the fair, and it's not my jam.
That's the wine of the art world. That's what it is. Okay, one more.
Oh, God, I keep just expecting you to ask the 4. It's our 44th edition.
There you go. What is your guilty pleasure outside of art?
Oh my God. Okay. I love procedural television shows.
Okay.
So yeah. And I love rewatching television shows. So I've seen The West Wing, the entire thing, maybe 7 times. Bones. Well, that one's fun because she's so smart and like they're in a museum. And like NCIS.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I love you know that it's going to end, that there's like 45 minutes, you turn your brain off. You'll have a complete
forgot
story.
what they said. I think somebody said this to me, but they say that people usually rewatch familiar television shows because it gives them a sense of comfort if they're like highly anxious.
Yeah.
There you go.
We can talk about my anxiety at another time.
on a different episode.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. And I'm super excited for this edition of AIPAD. Tell us what days people can come and see it.
So we open in April, the 24th through the 27th. Come on down. We're at the Park Avenue Armory. As you know, we have 12 talks over 4 days, 66 exhibitors, 20 plus publishers and photo book partners. It's going to be really great. And yeah, I think you'll have a great time. So join us.
It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
Again, thank you. And to all my listeners, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.